Does the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka relate to the real world?
Let's find out.
Hey guys, and welcome to the 65th edition of Quarter Hour of Literature. I'm your host Hassan, and today we're joined by literary analyst Abdul Jafar.
Thanks for having me, Hassan.
It's our pleasure. Okay, so we got a question from one of our viewers that goes by name Nairu Hulan. Sorry for butchering. Whatever. And he asks, how does the Metamorphosis relate to the real world?
Well, that's a very good question, Nero. We're going to call you Nero for this one. But anyways, to answer your question, there are many ways. But before we find an example, we first have to pick a theme in the novel. Now, one that me and Hassan already chose is dehumanization. So, dehumanization is a big theme which is presented many times throughout the novel.
So now that we picked our theme, we have to relate it to the real world. And one example that we both agreed upon is slavery and segregation. Now, Gregor, the main character, represents being dehumanized quite a lot. The most obvious being, some could say that he physically turns into a bug in the beginning of the novel.
But a more psychological way of thinking about it is even before he became a big dung beetle, he states he was a tool to the boss without brains or backbone. This means he wasn't even appreciated, and he's been working for 5 years and hadn't even taken a sick day, yet he's still not trusted.
Slaves aren't appreciated either. They aren't even paid. Like, at least Gregor got paid.
But he only kept a few. He says he had kept a few dollars for himself and had never completely used up and had accumulated into a tiny principal. Gregor had a choice, and he chose to sell his social life to pay off his parents' debt, a debt that probably had nothing to do with him. He basically was being used. Similarly, with a lot of slaves, in many cases, slaves were sold into slavery by their families, and many volunteered for the burden. Like Gregor, they basically had to give up their future for their parents' problem. Take it in, they were using him for all those years, and when they couldn't, they were too embarrassed by him and didn't want him around, especially when the boarders were living there.
But would you want some 6-foot bug crawling up on your new roommates who have no clue about him? I wouldn't, that's for sure.
And yeah, that's what really caused them to feel like dehumanized and isolated, because they would constantly say things like not being able to live with it. Similarly, with a lot of slave masters, when they don't want their slaves to be their equal and they are looked at as like lower than their masters. Furthermore, Rosa Parks, who faced segregation and is well known in American history for stepping up and not sitting in the back of the bus, right? Well, she, like all black Americans at the time, had to sit at the back of the bus and out of sight, not have the same rights as the whites at the time. Well, this can be shown in the book also, like how they didn't want Gregor around the dinner table and they didn't want him near the boarders when they're eating, and basically didn't want him anywhere near anyone normal.
How about punishments? When slaves aren't doing their job or they're out of place, they usually are beat or whipped. William Wells, who's a slave, recalled that in his fits of anger, he would take up a chair and throw it at a servant, and in his more rational moments, when he wished to chastise one, he would tie them up in a smokehouse and then whip them, after which he would cause a fire to be made of tobacco stems and then smoke them.
Well, not as harsh, of course, but when Gregor unintentionally caused his mom to faint, his dad got really angry and started whipping apples at him while chasing him. This shows that he didn't actually believe that he was his son anymore, right? Basically, why would he use such extreme force if he truly believed that Gregor in beetle form was his kid?
I agree. He took care of them for like 5 years, and they've already given up and lost hope, and it's only been 1 month.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad. To me, that Gregor theoretically became more of a human when he transformed to a bug. He spoke about his problems, which made him more social. If only they understood him. He appreciated his sisters playing and joined their gathering and actually had a personality. However, everyone else viewed him as the opposite, no longer human after the transformation. It even got to the point when the family started using his room like storage, and he says his family had gotten into the habit of putting in his room things for which they could not find any other place, and that really made it unlivable and depressing for him.
Yeah, similarly, slaves were crammed into small wooden shacks, usually with dirt floor. Josiah Henson, who was a slave, wrote, "Wooden floors were an unknown luxury. In a single room were huddled like cattle. 10 or a dozen persons, men, women, and children, We had neither bedsteads nor furniture of any description. Our beds were collections of straw and old rags, thrown down in the corners and boxed in with boards. A single blanket was the only covering.
Yup, slaves had it really harsh. In fact, many couldn't take it anymore and actually committed suicide for reasons like the unlivable environment they were given and wanted freedom. I believe Gregor's dad had the same sort of reasoning. Gregor was tired of not being treated well, and felt death was the only way to escape this, and that's what he did. He said things like he was completely filled with rage at this miserable treatment and the treatment he got.
So to sum up the answer, a real life example is segregation and slavery. As we mentioned in greater detail before, we portrayed Gregor as a slave to the people in society. If anything is unclear, please feel free to send us an email about what's unclear, and maybe we'll be able to clarify and answer it.
Until next time.